long time ago, back in 2001, there was a company called Redigi. And what they would do was, if you had an MP3 on your iPhone that you didn't like anymore, you could sell it to them. While you were there, you could see some used MP3 that you liked and buy it. Just a used MP3 marketplace.
Oh my gosh.
Now, can anybody guess what the very next thing that happens is?
Lawsuit.
Absolutely. Capitol Records says you are enabling illegal copy making. And Redigi says, well, allow me to retort. So Redigi says that the law that you're citing, that says we're making illegal copies, is a law that requires a material substance. And since MP3 files are not, in fact, material objects, they are not subject to this distribution right. And then they're like, you know what, I'll go you one better. Even if they were physical materials, there's the first sale doctrine, which basically says if you own something, you get to decide the cost at which you resell it. So either way, if it's physical, resale covers us. If it's not, well, there's no distribution right for non-material objects. So can anyone guess? Well, let me back up. So what's at issue here is this true? They post this on their website, and they say, you bought it, you own it, you can resell it. They put this on their website, and a New York federal judge has to decide, is this true? Can anyone guess what the federal judge decided?
No, it's not.
Not so much. But here's what he said. He said, it is beside the point that the original phono record no longer exists. It matters only that a new phono record has been created, which leads to one inevitable question, what the hell is a phono record? So this is one of my favorite pieces of law language ever. A phono record is basically a device that has captured, that is to which a music has been fixed. The actual phrasing here, material objects in which sounds, other than those accompanying a motion picture or audiovisual work, are fixed. So it's this very mystical sounding language, right? Here's this device I have, and somehow the singer's voice has been ghostly trapped on here, and now I have it. So with that definition of a phono record, if we look at the judge's decision, what he's basically saying is, look, it is beside the point that the original phono record no longer exists. What does that mean? Well, Redigi has a policy. If you sell your used MP3, you have to remove it from your iPhone, from your hard drive. You cannot have it anymore. So that original phono record, that match of digital file to hard drive, no longer exists. The problem, the judge says, is that you have created a new phono record, because as soon as someone goes into the used MP3 marketplace, downloads that used MP3 and puts it on their iPhone, you have created a new phono record and have thus made an illegal copy. So, the beauty of this case, and I highly recommend that you go find an episode of Planet Money that discusses this in detail, is that the judge does things like talk about Star Trek as a way of understanding what all of this means. He says that if Kirk beams down to a planet, well, that's one thing, because it's still the same Kirk. But if the transporter malfunctions and makes a good Kirk and a bad Kirk, well, that's copy. So he actually says this in court. It's fascinating.
Wow.
So, given all of this, the judge actually comes up with a solution. Says there is a legal way for you to resell your MP3s. Can anyone guess what that legal way is?
Convert it to a CD hard drive.
Sell your iPhone. You got that song on your iPhone you don't want anymore? I will sell it to you for 50 cents. Thank you very much. Now I have legally sold that MP3 because I haven't created a new phono record. It's still the same phono record. So here's the funny thing about this whole case. The judge was absolutely right. Given the antiquated 1976 copyright law that he had to work with, he's absolutely right. And in terms of the economy that we kind of understand, the economy of scarcity, that we buy and sell things that are scarce, this is the only scarce thing in that whole equation. How we pay for a thing is very tied to how we think about that thing. So the examples that we're used to is this notion that if something is desirable and it's scarce, it should be expensive. One Hope diamond in the world should be damn expensive, big, bright, shiny thing. 1 million Hope diamonds in the world, they're nice. I'd probably pay still a decent penny for it, but not nearly as much. On the flip side of that, if something is desirable and common, like water, it may not be free, but it better well damn well be cheap. What we don't have is a way of thinking about it's desirable and it's infinitely replicable. How do I price that? We don't really have a way of an economy for that right now. So we kind of made one up. We created artificial scarcity. We create things like iTunes, where we pretend like there is one copy of Jack Reacher that I then download onto my iPhone, and now suddenly there's one less copy of Jack Reacher in the world. That's not what actually happens, but we're going to pretend like that happens, because that's what happens in a store. iTunes is a store. We call it a store. It looks like a storefront, and we think we're pulling objects down, and it's a pretty good illusion, right? And it's actually, I use the iTunes store, it's great. Only problem is, this breaks very easily, and the Redigi case kind of highlights why. So for example, record companies want you to treat digital goods like physical goods until they don't, right? So when I'm buying it from the iTunes store, I want you to pretend like it's a physical good. But as soon as you own it, I don't want you to treat it like a physical good that you can resell. No, I'm a super asshole. So this fight isn't over yet. Amazon and iTunes have both filed patents to basically get the infrastructure together to create resale markets for ebooks. And the publishing industry is freaking the hell out. I was talking to a guy who works for Simon & Schuster, and he was saying, look, because this is a legal battle, right? If the law comes down and says, yes, you can legally resell ebooks, that's it. That's the ballgame. There's no way we can compete with that. So this is a little bit more murky, right, than just you own it, you bought it, you can resell it, because in some cases when you're talking about digital goods, you don't own it, you license it, it's treated like software. And the judge really punted on this issue, right? He didn't say whether or not first sale rights apply here, that you own it and resell it. All he said was, look, you made it, I don't care what else happens, you made it a legal copy, that's what they're suing for, they're right. But this whole issue of reselling, he didn't really get into. Now, this isn't consistent. iTunes, for example, if you bother to look through the 5 million terms of service, they actually give you the title. You can resell it in theory, in that theory. But Amazon doesn't, right? So there's still some murkiness there. But the problem with licensing is, as J.D. Lassica, the guy who wrote this very good book called Darknets, wrote, licensing content in that sense, licensing entertainment, is kind of like saying, okay, you're going to buy a book and you're going to put it on your bookshelf, but every time you go to your bookshelf to pull it off, I'm going to charge you money. That's just not how we think about the content. And remember, how we think about a thing and how we price it are very related. There's a disconnect here right now when it comes to digital content. But let's throw all that out and just get back to the very basic reason the judge was kind of right and Redigi was kind of wrong, is the reason you can't actually sell a used MP3. And the reason you can't do it is because there is no such thing. It's an absurdity. It doesn't fit into the way digital things work. So, maybe familiar with these men and women. They were recently in the news for having all sorts of fun with the economy. This is Congress, and they were presented a paper by the Copyright Office back in 2001. Even then, Copyright Office figured, look, digital resale is coming and it's a horrible idea, and here's why. Because they basically said, look, digital information does not degrade. The used copy is just as desirable, in fact, is indistinguishable from a new copy of the same work. So time, space, and effort and cost no longer act as barriers, and are no longer a natural break on the effect of resales, right? So it's a completely different paradigm, and they had figured this out a decade ago. What's the first thing that happens when you drive a car off a lot?
You lose 20% of your money.
Right. What's the first thing that happens when you download an MP3?
Nothing.
Nothing at all. It's the exact same thing. It's still in the store. It's still in the air, right? Entropy keeps the physical market afloat. It's important that things degrade when you buy them. It allows a second resale market to exist because that second market can't possibly compete with the first market because the first market is new, the second market is old and used, and even...
To a point, right? Because there are some old things that get more expensive.
Right, and that's, but still, that requires time, right? So,
yeah.
It's actually using entropy to your favor, right? So if I buy wine, right, that's actually good entropy, but it still has to take place. If the wine I bought never changes, ever, excuse me, or if that piece of art I buy doesn't ever actually get old in relation to other things, or if there's a million things like it in the world, I can't use entropy to my favor in that way either. Digital content, the idea of an original and copy ceases to exist. And that wreaks havoc with how we think about economies and scarcity. However, we actually kind of have a way to think about that just as a concept of things not having an original and a copy. We actually already have a way to think about this. Here's where I'm going to completely lift from Michael Tomasello and Clay Shirky. So Michael Tomasello wrote a book called Why We Cooperate, I think was what it was called. And one of the things he talks about is 3 kinds of sharing. And the way he illustrates this is, he says, okay, imagine you're walking down the street, and one of 3 things happens to you, right? In the one case, someone asks you for money, all right? And you have one kind of an emotional reaction to that. Now someone asks you to help them cross the street. You have a different reaction to this. Finally, someone asks you for directions, and you have a different kind of an emotional reaction to that, all right? Why these different reactions? Well, in the first case, someone's asking you for money, they want you to share goods. That's the first kind of sharing. And if I give them that money, I don't have it anymore. It's a pretty big ask. And if someone saw you and saw you not give them money, they're not necessarily going to blame you. They'll probably do the same thing. Helping someone cross the street, that's the sharing of a service. I'm not going to lose any money. I'm not going to lose anything I can't really get back, so I'm going to get a little bit of time. But I have to make effort. I have to walk across the street. Maybe I didn't want to go to that side of the street. I have to do something. So it's a different kind of emotional reaction, but it's not as big an ask. Somebody asks you for directions, that's sharing of information, all right? I'm not going to forget how to get to Starbucks if I tell you how to get to Starbucks. I get to keep that. And if someone saw me getting asked that information and for whatever reason knew I had it and I still refused, well, now I'm kind of a dick, right? I'm not, you know, it's different than if they ask me for money and I refuse them. And I might even get a little bit of an emotional hit out of giving them the information, right? Hey, I get to show off how much I know about my neighborhood. Cool, okay. So let's apply this, and this was the Clay Shirky twist on this. He said, let's apply this to music. I'm going to give you one of my albums to listen to. For as long as you have that album, I don't have it. That's the sharing of a good. If I make you a mixtape, and a real mixtape, not sharing you a Spotify playlist, no, I make you a mixtape, I sit down and I record things one by one. I get to keep all my music, but it's a service. I actually have to take time out of my day to do a thing. I want to share a file. Back in the days of Kazan LimeWire, I just open that thing up and you come get it. I don't have to do anything. So when people, back when Napster was sort of at its height, and there was this hue and roar about, oh, all these juvenile delinquents. The psychology there wasn't the psychology of a juvenile delinquent. The psychology was of, it's a dick move not to share information. Why wouldn't you? It's just information. That's how we think about things that do not have an original and a copy. And here's the problem. Content is now information. It doesn't just point to information. It doesn't just contain information. It doesn't just represent information. That's what it used to do. No, it actually is information now. It actually is zeros and ones. So the question becomes, is there a way to think about monetizing that thing? Content, and aligning that with the fundamental nature of content, something that aligns with the way we think about it. So here's one proposal. We're going to call this content as a service, right? We're going back to the notion of we want to make the thing that's scarce make the thing that's ubiquitous free. So, Avengers, it's a movie, but a movie now is just zeros and ones. It's ubiquitous, it's everywhere. Joss Whedon, really only one of him. We only have so many hours in the day, so many days in the year. So we're going to think more broadly about what we pay for. Now we know we pay for goods, that's the scarcity model, but we also pay for services, right? As Homer taught us, money can be exchanged for goods and services. So why might we want to start to focus on the services part of this? Well, for one reason, goods are kind of going away, right? So this is a chart from 91 through 2012, looking at Germany, Britain, and the US, and how much people are paying for services versus how much people are paying for goods. All the lines you see going up are services, all the lines you see going down are goods. Getting back to the notion of scarcity, here's where the music industry has been making its money over the past, say, 10 years. Actually, a little more than that. The lines you see going down are things like recorded music, or leveling out, things like internet and mobile phones. The one thing you see going up is concerts. And in the world of music, that's the one thing that's still truly scarce. I can only be in that venue, that one time, that one moment. And people are still willing to pay a premium for it. Concert sales, concert prices are the one thing that's still going up, while MP3 prices went down. So, I'm a content strategist, I'm a filmmaker, I'm just some guy. No shareholders are actually counting on my decisions when it comes to content. But someone who works for AT&T, who actually has a stake in the content game, who actually wears a suit and stuff, said, we just don't think that ownership will be around in the future. This was at a conference at Tribeca earlier this year. And he was referring to DVDs. He was saying, look, people spinning discs, we know that's not going to keep happening. And the market bears him out. The DVD sales have flattened out. He sees a future in access. He sees a future in streaming. Which takes us to this, right? So access over ownership. Why would I prefer to just access things as opposed to own them? Well, I'll tell you a short story about that. So I am upstairs with my wife, and we decide that we want to watch Pride and Prejudice, the big 5-hour Pride and Prejudice, right? And we have it on DVD downstairs. But before we go to all the trouble of going downstairs and getting it, we actually check to see if it's available on Netflix streaming. And I can guarantee you, had it been, there's no way we would have gone downstairs to get the thing, find it, take it back upstairs, open it up, open up the DVD player, take Finding Nemo out, figure out where it goes, pull out the DVD, put it in, close it, flip to the DVD, find it on the menu, then hit play. Versus flip, flip, click. So of course I would prefer ownership, access over ownership, because it's a better user experience, if nothing else. But there's another reason too. What would you say is the average use a drill gets in its entire lifetime? That's 10 minutes. 10 minutes, most drills, all they ever get used. Why? I want the hole. I don't want the drill. Once I've got the hole, I don't need the drill anymore. So I just want the TV show. I want to be watching a TV show on my screen. I don't care how it got there. I don't care if it got there because I put the DVD in. I don't care if it got there because I clicked the button. I just want to have it there. Once I've got that, the rest is kind of conversation. And we see this not just with digital things, but with physical things, right? We have a sharing economy around cars now.
I just want to say I can't wait till robot cars can do this, and I don't even have to drive.
Yeah, well, you know what? I bet you, because you know Google's developing the.
Yeah.
I'm sure that is one of the business models they were exploring, right?
Yeah.
Just Uber with robots.
Yeah.
Done.
Yeah, I've read that also on the, yeah.
So yeah, like, and again, I want the whole. I don't want the car. I want to be somewhere else. However you get me there, teleport, rickshaw, whatever. The better user experience you make, and less effort I have to put into it. Great. If that means I don't have to actually physically own a car and pay insurance and have it in my taking up room, great.
But isn't life about the journey?
Yeah, but if the journey was like a robot cat who's telling me jokes.
If your journey is in a robot car, that's an awesome journey.
Better user experience, right?
For that over.
So consumption these days and going forward increasingly is things magically appear and I want them, right? If you're into D&D or Harry Potter, you know this is the bag of holding or the room of requirement. It just appears, and then when I don't want it, it goes away. I don't have to deal with the physicality of it.
What is that a picture of?
Oh, sorry, this is from Harry Potter. This is the little bag Hermione has that she pulls stuff out of.
A bag of happy.
So here's the other problem with ownership. Expensive to consume, but it's also expensive to produce. So this is the Lizzie Bennet Diaries was a web series they did a Kickstarter for not too long ago. And they had a first season that went very well. The second season, the Kickstarter went not so much to the production costs, that was some of it, but most of it was to produce DVDs for people who wanted DVDs of the first season. That was the expensive part. Not making the show, not distributing the show, making the damn DVDs. So imagine this if you are Universal, if you are Paramount, and you're deciding which DVDs to actually produce for you, which movies to actually put out on DVD. That's going to be a certain amount of cost of production and distribution of physical goods. Versus licensing that stuff to Netflix or to Comcast and saying, oh wait, in that scenario, they pay me.
Does that also stand to reason when those same companies are also looking at like electronic sell-throughs? So they're talking about like, hey, it's available to you. I'm going to sell you the file, right? Not necessarily DVD, but I'm going to give you the necessary rights. Here's a content locker of your stuff.
Yeah. And that's sort of like trying to have your cake and eat it too, right? Kind of keep the access model and the ownership model going at the same time. And there's some like value to that, right? Because the one thing, sort of hidden secret of access, it's only access if it's really access. If I come back a week from now and Iron Giant isn't on Netflix anymore, which happened, It's not the same as if I own it. So there are sort of like, there's a value proposition there to say, okay, you don't have to physically own it, but you also don't have to worry about us like removing it from the shelf.
Do you think that means that we're getting more things like Warner Archive? Warner Brothers has this thing where they've got a bunch of 1940s and 50s films that there's not a huge demand for, unless you're a massive film nerd and it's just like this niche audience. You can order basically DVDs on demand. They will do a print on demand service if you want this, and it's not worth it. It wouldn't make them any money if they license it to Netflix.
Mhm.
But if a small audience happens to want it in distribution, they've got that model.
Right.
It's kind of like print on demand. Do you think we're heading more towards that with like just with mainstream things? If this trend continues?
So kind of, yeah. So a couple of things with that. One is, we'll get to this in a second, but all right, take that a few generations forward, and print on demand just means I send you the file and you physically print it with your 3D printer. The other piece of that, Netflix is actually getting better at niche. So a lot of people talk about how Netflix's business model has lots to do with sort of lower profit margins and original series, but where they're really killing it is niche. And if you go through like Netflix, whatever, like menus, you'll see these super weird niches like Canadian documentaries about robots. Like that's an actual thing, and they'll buy up all of the stuff that's in there because they found through their market research that people love that stuff. So I think people are still going to use niche as a way to market streaming content. But when it comes to stuff like that, print on demand, I think that is going to be in the future, but it's going to be more you print on demand, and it's still going to be a digital file at the end of the day. Just as a quick side note, I have to wonder if piracy starts becoming less of an issue, right? Piracy is about, I download a thing, I own it, right? I have it. It's a substitute for access. So there are some people who are always going to pirate, right? That's just going to be the way it is. If you're like me and full, I did in fact, steal, I think it was seasons of Sherlock, because they weren't available anywhere. If I could have paid for that, I would have paid for it. If I could have gotten it off Netflix, HBO, whatever, if it had been made available, I would have paid good money for it. It wasn't available. I'm an impatient jerk. I downloaded it, so I didn't have to wait a year to actually watch it. But if access is there, this doesn't help me at all. So to your point, no, really, goods are going away, right? So this is a prosthetic hand that was 3D printed, I believe actually a fairly cheap 3D printer. So we're going to get to the point where there's going to be a class of objects that you just 3D print at home because it's cheaper than going out to the store, because it's cheaper than having it shipped to you. It's not going to be everything, but it's going to be more than you think. What I like to say is if you can print a liver, you can probably print an iPhone, although the iPhone is actually a lot harder. But at the end, pretty much. Actually, it's funny.
If not, in reality, damn close to it right now.
The hard part actually they're having with that is, the reason they say it's going to be 20 years before you can take my genes and actually print me a new kidney isn't because of the kidney part. That's actually going to be the easy part. The hard part is going to be getting your blood vessels to grow to that kidney and feed it. So the stuff inside you is actually harder than the physical thing they have to make. But again, that kidney is going to be, at the end of the day, a digital file that's referencing lots of goop. So, with all of that, swirling out there, what's one possible path forward, right? And I stress here, this is one approach, not the only approach. We do not have a future of one approach anymore. And this is going to be true in healthcare and energy and pretty much every other problem that's more important than entertainment problems. There's going to be lots of approaches that are agile and suit a particular situation. So for a particular situation, I think we might try this. So back to this notion. So I'm having breakfast with a few friends of mine who are sort of professionals in the writing about economies and content field, right? And we sort of have, this is back 2011 maybe, and Joss Whedon had not yet, in fact, directed the third highest grossing film of all time, so he was still kind of a cult figure. And we said, hey, Joss Whedon goes on Kickstarter and he says, you know what, I want to make Serenity 2, and it's going to cost me $25 million. Who's in? Does he actually make his money? And we agreed if he had some pretty good, rewards, maybe for $1 million you get to have lunch with Nathan Fillion naked, maybe, he might actually make that. Then we say, okay, well, let's make this a little more interesting. We say, Joss Whedon goes on Kickstarter and he says, all right, I don't know what I'm going to make. I'm not going to tell you what it is. I know it's going to cost about $2 million, and it's going to be awesome, but it could be a video, it could be a cave painting, we have no idea what it's actually going to be. So going in blind just on the faith in Joss Whedon, does he make $2 million? And we agreed, I think he would. In fact, I might even contribute to that. So then we took it one step further and said, well, what about this scenario? What if I could just subscribe to Joss Whedon? Maybe 20 bucks comes out of my account every month, goes to the Joss Whedon fund. And it ensures that he is spending his time making the stuff that he loves. Now I'm going to gamble that it's also going to be stuff that I love. So he's not going to have to go work at Starbucks. He's not going to have to go make some movie because Universal wants him to make it and it isn't a very good movie but he needs the money. No, he's going to spend his time doing what he loves and it's going to create stuff that I love. And we think that might work. We're not the only ones. So what we're really talking about is crowdsourced patron.
Who's we?
Oh, the people at the table. We agreed, yeah, it would actually probably work.
Oh.
But then there are other people
Discussion
who
then.
are, yeah, in that section. There are other people, though, who seem to be trying this out. So this is patronism. It's basically a way to subscribe to musicians, right? And sort of fund them directly through regular contributions. And, you know, as this sort of conceptually, as this model goes, hey, if I don't think that this musician, or if I think Joss Whedon is getting worse, he's slacking, he's not making enough stuff anymore, I don't like the stuff he's making, I can turn off the tap, or I can say, I'm only going to give $1 a month now. So I gave this talk a couple weeks ago at Panama, and that night, or the very next day, I found out about this. So this is a subscription model, right? You subscribe to a particular creator, and this is really around web series, around science web series actually, that's how it started. But a subscription which allows an audience to connect with a fund, and fund the creators they love. And in both cases, it's this notion of you are going to fund the creator, right? Support the people who make the content, not support the content. And that's the shift I'm talking about, right? We're going from the thing that's not scarce, the content, to,
Sorry, what's the website?
oh, Subbable, Subbable, Subbable. Very interesting, check it out. But yeah, it's the notion, I'm going to start supporting the artist, not the content. And you'll see it again here. So this is a website called Flatter. And it's a slightly different model. It's not really a subscription, but it's a way of saying, okay, I see something you like. You're on YouTube, or you're on Flickr. I'm going to click like. And when I click like, a little micro donation is going to go to you. And every time I click like on that thing, it's a little micro donation. It's tied to a bank account. So it's a way of actually adding literal value to your favorites. But again, the notion is I'm directly supporting you, not the thing you made. So this isn't exactly new, right? Trying to make like a direct connection between the artist and the audience, right? And in fact, these guys have actually made it work from a financial standpoint. And this is actually one of the holes, right? Louis C.K., Kevin Smith, Trent Reznor all had established audiences when they tried this out, right? And they got those established audiences the old-fashioned way, using studios, using that same system. So how could this possibly apply to anyone else? How in this system could we possibly discover new talent? Does anybody recognize this guy? All right, how about now? Did anyone see The Heat? No one seen The Heat. You should totally see The Heat. It's awesome. So Sandra Bullock and Melissa McCarthy. So they got in this picture the old-fashioned way, right? You know, working, horrible jobs, and then, being in lots of movies, and generally over a decade gained their stardom. Melissa McCarthy, I found this out actually, Jenny McCarthy is her cousin. So maybe even knowing people in the industry, right? So they got that route. This guy, over the course of 5 or 6 years, grew an audience on YouTube. He's never been in a movie. If you go to his IMDb page, there's like The Heat and one other thing, and that's it. Never been, did not really do even the comedy club circuit. He couldn't get into the comedy club circuit, so he decided to start making videos on YouTube, and that's it. That's been his exposure, all right? And that, over the course of, starting back around 2008, he's grown to about 1 million subscribers on YouTube. This got him to the attention of, among other things, YouTube, which then got him in front of the director of this film. So he goes from YouTube directly to a blockbuster movie with Sandra Bullock and Melissa McCarthy. So he's got 1 million subscribers on YouTube. Now let's do the math here for a second. Only 5% of that audience decides to give him just $1 a month. He makes $600,000 a year. I can almost guarantee you that's not as much money as he made working on The Heat. He doesn't need Hollywood. Hollywood needs him. There's an interesting side discussion, I talked to people about this, there's an interesting side discussion to be had about the economies of scale for stars and how much we pay for them today versus how much we might pay for them in the future, because this guy isn't going to be as expensive as, Brad Pitt. And probably never will be, but we'll still make good money. So here's another objection, right? That if you make a direct connection between the artist and the fan will start driving the boat. Veronica Mars, Kickstarter, pretty famous. Rob Thomas tries to resurrect it for the screen and makes way over his goal. And in an interview, he says something to the effect of, I'm going to make the movie that the fans want. And one of the interpretations of that comment was, oh crap, he's going to make a horrible film and just any little thing the fans want, he's going to throw it in there and it's going to be like really bad fanfic, right? So possibly what he meant, possibly, a valid objection, but the thing is, I think, and this is a common kind of objection, I think it underestimates a certain ethic when it comes to Kickstarter and crowdfunding from a couple different angles, right? So for the artist, I believe crowdfunding is more about control than it is about actual money. So Zach Braff went on Kickstarter to raise money for his next film. And people were like, it's Zach Braff, he can make his own money. He doesn't need to go on Kickstarter for that. And they're right. He could get that money from an investor, from likely a small studio. And that small studio would have very clear demands. You need to cast this person and this person because they test well internationally. We're really only going to make money internationally on this thing. You're going to have to change this about the plot and that about the plot because the computer told us that these plot points actually make more money. He will not have control. He will have money, but he will not have control. He goes out to Kickstarter and says, look, this is the movie I want to make. Are you in? Are you not in? Completely up to you. This is what I intend to do. It gets crowdfunded. They are not then going to go back and tell him, oh no, I want you to do this and now you have to have this star. No, it's already been settled up front. This is the movie I'm going to make. Do you want to come on this journey with me? So what he's interested in is control more than it is money. From the audience, more often than not, it's about passion as opposed to the product, right? So I've done maybe 8 different Kickstarter things, and I barely remember any of the rewards I was supposed to get. In fact, when they come in the mail, I'm like, oh right, I funded that. I didn't fund it to get a t-shirt. I didn't even fund it necessarily to get a movie made. I funded it because I wanted to be part of something bigger than myself that I love. I funded it as an act of fandom. So I funded the Roxy, restoring the Roxy movie theater, right? And there's just a pretty good perch for that one. But I did it because I love that theater. I love the idea of having a movie theater there. I funded the Veronica Mars movie. If the Veronica Mars movie turns out to be utter crap, I won't be pissed. I won't think, oh, I wasted my money. I thought, oh, wow, well, that was a great try, guys. Like, we all got together and tried to make something beautiful because we love this thing. It's passion. It's not, oh, like I walk into Macy's and I want to buy a shirt. So what does this model actually look like compared to what we've got now? So this is a little complicated, but at the end of the day, it's about where does the risk lie. So yeah, I've been kind of like saying that those horrible studios making those ridiculous demands, well, you know what? They're making all the risk too. They're investing millions of dollars. If you invested millions of dollars in something, I bet you'd want a lot of control too. And so where does that control go, right? So the studio's gonna have like final cuts, they're gonna allow the gatekeeping, they're gonna decide who's a star, who's not a star. And from your end, well, they're going to decide how much you have to pay to watch the thing. They're also going to control all the digital rights management. They're going to sue you if you try to put Mickey Mouse's face on a cake. True story. This model, on the other hand, things get a little bit interesting. So instead of having a studio negotiating a relationship between an artist and a creator, now you have a platform that's just kind of being a place for them to have a relationship, right? So now, the artist, we've distributed the risk between the artist and among lots and lots and lots of stakeholders. So the artist gets to keep a little more control there and has final cut. In terms of DRM, they can say, you know what, I'm going to actually open this up completely or I'll keep it completely closed. It's up to me. But I have a slider bar on just how much DRM there is. In fact, I may even share creation duties with you. Audience, they get to decide who's going to be a star. Nobody at Paramount pointed at Spoken Reasons and said, oh, you are going to be a star, we are going to cultivate you. No, audience decided. And they decided literally the price of that, right? And the same thing with the pricing. Most of these models you see, even before we started getting into Kickstarter, when Radiohead released In Rainbows, you got to decide how much you paid for In Rainbows. And surprisingly, people actually paid money for it because they love Radiohead, not because they were looking to get a free album. So all of these power dynamics change once you distribute the risk. The risk ends up being kind of the fulcrum for a lot of this. And by the way, I threw Xbox One in here because they're apparently developing an indie platform for indie gamers. So even they're sort of starting to recognize there might be a market here.
Well, they rumored it.
Yes, I should stress, yes.
They rumored it and then pulled it out.
Oh, they pulled it out?
Yeah.
Okay. Change that slide.
Yeah.
So,
It's kind of funny. I've worked in the internet advertising business for a couple of years. I don't work there anymore, but like YouTube and the places where people kind of become stars. I mean, that's internet advertising. It's paying YouTube for distributing that content, and also YouTube shares a bit with it with the artists. Well, that's mostly for big, real goods like cars. You know, you get GM, BMW, Mercedes advertising there. That'll make a lot of money. It's
That's
usually
interesting.
for big goods.
yeah, that's an interesting point.
Wait, describe that again?
So people are becoming stars in these contexts like YouTube, Vimeo, places that have free content, but that's supported by advertising. And that advertising is usually for big products like cars, usually cars or maybe vacations. They're scarce items.
Sure.
I don't know if they'll go away.
Right, exactly. So the question, so the gamble becomes, if the goods go away, then where does the revenue come from? So one
Right.
possible, and this, and again, a lot of this is experimental, right? We haven't actually tested this yet, but
So many long.
services themselves don't go away though. So that vacation,
Right.
that's still technically kind of a service. Like, there's no way to make a vacation ubiquitous.
Right. H&R.
I can't turn a digital file into a vacation.
Right.
So or I can't turn investment services into a vacation, or a credit card into a vacation, or into a digital file. So as long as you have enough of a service market to sustain a YouTube advertising model, then you're safe, right? But if it becomes too easy for me to print a vacation on my, 3D printer,
Or a computer to do H&R Block's job.
right? Then we start. But even then, as long as it's a service, as long as it's something that needs to be continually deployed, it's really hard for me to turn that into something I can pirate or something that I don't need. That's why the gaming industry is in such a good position because I can digitally download and pirate a game, but I can't play with anybody. To play with anybody, I need the real thing, and I need a whole network.
Yeah.
So it still falls in that service realm. So this model is not for everyone. So what do I mean by that? Well, one thing is, this is not a path for you as a musician or as an artist or as a filmmaker to get a mansion. This will never happen, right?
Whose mansion
Is
is
that
that?
Aaron Spelling's house?
I'm not sure. It's whatever came up third in Google. So that's not what this is going to get you. But what it might get you is enough money to make your next project, which is what most artists want. And we started talking about this last night. You probably saw me like live, we were talking about middle class. I'm like, oh, right.
Yeah.
We got to talk about this.
And there are people in.
Oh,
talking
okay.
about
So
it
you're,
here.
so
Yeah.
you know,
These
that's
are a lot
fine.
of things like
But yes, we could possibly bring back the middle class, right? You can have a situation where you're able to, afford to send your kids to a nice college or a good co-working space or whatever ends up being the most valuable thing in the future. And you'll be able to keep doing what you love, which is kind of the point in the first place for most people. Most people who want to create things don't want to create them so they can afford to buy the Lakers. The other thing is there's a certain class, right, of product they'll be able to make, okay? So guess what costs $7 million? You actually know the answer to this. We talked about this last night. One episode of Game of Thrones costs $7 million. I would love to be wrong about what I'm about to say, but I don't think we're ever going to be able to crowdfund Game of Thrones. We're going to need to figure out a different solution for this. And I say that because this isn't guaranteed. This is running into problems as well. But what I think you're going to see more of is the hybrid approach. So this is Seth Godin. He usually self-publishes, but he decided for my next book, I'm going to make a deal with Simon & Schuster. And I forget who the publisher was, but they basically said, look, if you can raise $40,000 on Kickstarter for your next book, we will distribute it in stores. He, of course, being Seth Godin, raised $287,000, but at the end of the day, they got their deal. And I think this deal worked out better for the publisher because Seth Godin ended up doing a lot of their work for them. He proved the audience and, seeded what needed to happen. Louis C.K. did Live at the Beacon Theater on his own. He filmed it himself. He edited it himself. All of these things. Then distributed it himself. So obviously for his very next project, he did that again, right? No, his very next concert was with HBO. But he got to call the shots. he got to decide when it was, where it was, what he got to say, what he, all of that stuff was in his hands, because at any moment he could walk away from HBO and say, you know what, I don't need you. Now, HBO was good for him because it got him a broader audience, but that was icing on the cake at that point.
So there's something that I don't hear you talking about here, and it's the exchange of all of this digital information. It goes over a network. There's a commodity somewhere in here.
Right. And the network is a service, right? I can't pirate, well, I can kind of, but it's really hard. I can't pirate Comcast. I can't pirate Fios. I need to pay for that, and I'm willing to pay for that.
Sure, but there's also arguments between the various underlying companies associated with some of this stuff too. Like, there have been highly publicized arguments between Netflix and Comcast related to how much bandwidth Netflix is using, right?
Yeah.
Where does that play in all of this?
So this gets really interesting, really complicated, really fast, right? So first off, and I get to this a little later, but first off, one of the things this all kind of relies on is net neutrality. And if that goes away, say goodbye to all of this. This model breaks down quickly. And that's one of those big arguments, right? And how that plays out is going to play into this. If someone can crack, and I don't even know if this is possible, if someone can crack sort of the Netflix model and apply it to distribution and those networks. Because what Netflix does that allows this to kind of work is, instead of saying, okay, we're going to make something that only a certain number of people can afford and charge a ton for it and have a really high profit margin, okay? That's one approach. Another approach is to say, we're going to make something that isn't going to cost very much, but a lot of people are going to use it, right? So we're going to have a lower profit margin, but many more customers, right? It's a different approach. And not for nothing, but Netflix just surpassed HBO in terms of their actual number of customers. So that's kind of working for them, but it relies upon, you have one business model kind of floating on top of another, and it's starting to come to a head. So the answer is, I have no idea. The other weird player in this, and I have no idea how valid this ends up being, is Google, right? So they're trying to spread out Wi-Fi ubiquitously for free. And how does that make money? And how does that compete with these established networks? So one of the huge caveats here, right, is that net neutrality has to stay in place, and the economics still have to work for whoever is supplying the network.
Well, I mean, that's where the crux of that argument was, right? It wasn't actually an argument between Comcast and Netflix. It was an argument between Comcast, the network provider, and level 3, Netflix, underlying network provider, because the bandwidth coming from level 3 was so much higher than what Comcast was transmitting. So level 3 was asking Comcast to take a burden of traffic from them, right? So it's a net neutrality agreement between those two that says there is an exchange of money. Whether people like to talk about it or not, those large network providers, level 3, Comcast, and the rest of them that are out there, have agreements amongst one another to essentially measure what direction is the bandwidth actually going, and then exchange dollars based on how much one is using of the other's network. Right? So that net neutrality is based on, there's a dollar exchange between high volume providers of data traffic that exists, and that's where that argument was generally formed. That's going to grow ever increasingly true based on what you're saying here. So at some point, there's going to be an argument that is going to amount to an entire section of network traffic is going to get turned off. Because they don't want to exchange the dollars for it.
Yeah, and we've already seen bits of that with the CBS argument being made, and CBS basically saying, we're out of here. But I think to David's point, I think we can pretty much stipulate that, yeah, there's a whole economy here that's like in flux. We should really be paying attention to it, but at the same time, everything that you can enable at this level depends on that. So if we want to continue talking about that, we have to assume that this is actually a stable environment. But we all kind of know, nod, that maybe it's not as stable as we would actually think.
So I'm going to wrap up, but I want to continue this after. So similar situation with the guy who released Wool. He does a successful ebook. Publishers come to him and say, we want to make this a physical book. He says, fine, but you got to play by my rules. And when does that ever happen with an author who is named Stephen King? So post-ownership economy, what does this actually look like, right? So we're going to focus on the artist as opposed to the art, fund them. We're going to focus on the audience more than the distributor because the audience begins to become the distributor. We're going to focus on the passion more than the product because that's why I'm really interested in these things as opposed to just the one physical item. Same with access as opposed to possession. I want kind of a stream of things as opposed to these physical things that I own and have paid for. And then really, and this is the part that excites me the most, is this notion of focusing on the relationship as opposed to the transaction. Any good Kickstarter campaign you'll find actually involves a lot of communication between the artist and the fan. From before, from after, from throughout, all sorts of just, good relationship building. And that actually becomes part of the stock and trade of being a successful artist at that point, which, to be fair, means a lot of the misanthrope artists are going to have kind of a struggle. So I call it post-ownership economy, right? I use the word post-ownership, and when you put the word post in front of something, it suddenly sounds modern, so post-racial, post-modern, whatever, post-ownership. But this is very, very old. In fact, this came before the ownership model we're kind of used to now. So if you don't go too far back, if you wanted to hear a song, you had to go find the person who knew how to sing that song and watch them sing it. Or learn the song yourself and go home and play it. Those were pretty much your only options. If you go even further back and you wanted to hear a story, you had to go to Thac's cave and listen to Thac tell the story. And after you heard it enough times, you could probably tell it to somebody else. Those are pretty much your options. At some point, we learned how to actually capture stories on phonographics, all right? And I feel like we may have actually lost something when we did that. We didn't have to lose something, but we lost something because we took away the wrong lesson. We decided to make it harder to share things instead of making it easier. And once I can capture that thing and move it perfectly around the earth, physically, it took longer to walk, but it's the opportunity to share something. Instead, we decided, well, it's also the opportunity to commoditize something. And it wasn't a terrible choice. I mean, a lot of great art was created. A lot of people made a lot of money, but a lot of great art wasn't created. And a lot of people got stiffed, mostly artists. So what I'm kind of suggesting is if this time around, we focus less on trying to, let me back up for a second. The reason I love the V2G case is because it asks a very simple, profound question. What is a song? Is it an MP3, a digital file? Is it a record? Is it a piece of sheet music? I don't think so. I think those are just pointers to the song. The song is the song. So if we can focus less on trying to make money off of the pointers and more on why money is important to that whole ecosystem in the first place, which I think has more to do with making sure that more art can actually get created, I think we'll be better off for it. Thanks.